Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's Wrong with the Podcast. Today, we're happy to be speaking with George Bileca. George is the co-founder and chief design officer at Voxel Architects. Through Voxel Architects, he's helping brands and blockchain communities build a digital presence in the leading virtual worlds, while also developing assets and infrastructure solutions that aid the Metaverse rapid expansion. George studied in many fields, including architecture, product, and graphic design, ultimately specializing in transportation design. He got a BA in design in UK and further studied car body design in Munich, Germany. In mid-2019, he discovered the blockchain community and NFTs, marking the start of a new universe for him that resulted in entrepreneurship, with co-founding Voxel Architects. Leading a team of 20 people, George has carried out challenging 3D construction projects for renowned companies and personalities such as Consensys, Sotheby's, Outliers Ventures, and Bileca. George believes that the Metaverse is the future of the internet and that one day the Metaverse and the real world will coexist and work together as a whole. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we have the great pleasure of speaking with George Bileca. George is the Chief Design Officer of Voxel Architects. George, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Pinar. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, to correct you on that note, I've recently been promoted by the co-founder of Voxel Architects to Chief Executive Officer.
Yay! And here we'll have the effects on them. So. I'm glad you're sharing these exclusive news on our podcast. I'm joking.
But yeah, I mean, not necessarily relevant, but
no, that's perfect. We'll definitely include that part. That's so awesome. But do tell us more about your background, how you became part of Voxel, and what are you doing today?
Sure. So my background is in arts and humanities, and I've been doing art since I was very little. I was very passionate about sketching, about drawing. I was always passionate about cars. I was passionate about buildings, but basically everything that you can draw, that a kid can dream about drawing. So I followed an art school, and at the end of that art school, the profile architecture and design, because I found it really interesting and really. When I was in school, were literally calling me the architect because I loved doing perspective drawings, and that was let's say a point of launch for my career, so to say. That's why I followed architecture and design. So after I finished school, I decided to apply for university. I had the option to either go and apply to an architecture university or to do something that not a lot of people do, and apply to a car design university, which it was really uncommon in our country at that time, because there are a lot of architecture universities that you can follow. I can name 3 or 4 of them, but there was no car design university. So I found that really interesting that I found that in UK. I just applied and I managed to get in. Cars were a big passion for my life, so it was really hard for me to decide between cars and structures. So after I did a car design university, I moved to Germany and I started to work on car body design and 3D modeling. So basically, I was focusing on a professional software named Alias Automotive, and I was actually modeling the exterior and interior parts of a car. That's what they use as a standard in the automotive industry. Like people in the architecture industry use, let's say, a Revit or AutoCAD for plans, or all that software. But what I found is that throughout all my studies is that architecture, car design, industrial design in general, they are all interconnected, right? So it doesn't matter that if I did car design, I cannot do architecture, or vice versa. Obviously, there are some specifics to each category, but the essence, the core of it, art is basically the same, right? So there I was in Germany. I was actually at the start of the pandemic times, like an unfortunate, a series of unfortunate events, let's say, that led me to, let's say, stay at home and not be able to go to work anymore, right? So I was involved in this project, in this automotive project, which is called Crypto Motors. And it's one of the first ever NFT projects ever done. And it was done by a really good friend of mine and my mentor in the automotive industry, Leandro Bellone, who also happens to be the co-founder of Voxel Architects. So he taught me everything that he knew about, more or less everything that he knew about car design and car 3D modeling in Alias. I also worked on some Crypto Motors cars, and at the end of 2019, I remember that I was sitting at home and I was researching a little bit into this NFT space because he had this NFT business, and I was really curious. So what can you do with it, with the NFT? What is an NFT?
Yeah.
Like, why would someone buy these cars, right? And I happened to stumble upon some virtual world that was called basically the Metaverse back then. And imagine this was in 2019. So there was this virtual world, crypto voxels, blocky world similar to Minecraft, where you can basically, it's a sandbox game. It's you can just create whatever you want using blocks.
Yeah.
And I did have previous experience in the gaming. Like I played Minecraft, I played The Sims. I think
Yeah.
every young architect in this world must have played Sims at least once.
Yeah.
Um, and also I did work as an architectural visualizer for a company back in the day. So I knew how to model and create a house, and I also knew how to design things. So I just started out simple. Leandro was not that much into architecture. So while he teach me how to design those cars, I teach him how to basically design a building in this virtual world. So it was kind of like a payback for what he did for me. So we decided that the first building we will ever do is going to be a car dealership for his crypto motors car. And I remember we got the land from a really good friend of ours. He goes by the pseudonym of WhaleShark. We cannot disclose his real name because he decides to remain anonymous.
Ah.
But he was one of the early investors in the space, uh, and an avid collector of crypto motors, and he just handed us this land just to play out with, because you had to buy this land in order to try
Right.
out new things. So we built this dealership, and apparently it was a huge success because most of the buildings in that virtual world at that time were very messy. They were very um, not walkable. I don't know how to say, not understandable.
Right.
It's an entirely new concept, walking through the metaverse. And people didn't know to navigate through it. So what we did is we tried to create something relatable. We tried to create a building that people can walk through and actually relate to. And we create, let's say, a modern dealership, just a simple design out of, let's say, wood and black tiles. And fact is that the creator of this virtual world, Ben Nolan, actually noticed the building because it was right in the center, and he got really impressed by it. So we also got in touch with him, and he said that he really loves our work. And 1 month after, we also got our first client, which was also an investor in the space. That he wanted to create event spaces and galleries for his community. It was a really, really early NFT community. So think of early 2020, people weren't even talking about NFTs back then. So there I was creating this space, this Roman amphitheater where there was a weekly meeting, like an agora type of meeting that you see in ancient Greece,
Yeah.
where people were discussing about the evolution of the NFTs.
Wow.
Yeah, and slowly but steadily we increased our client base because they basically love what we were doing in crypto voxels. And not only we increased our client base, but we have also expanded to other virtual worlds. So we also moved from crypto voxels to Decentraland, to Somnium Space, and finally to Sandbox, which was released almost 1 year after, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly. Um, yeah, and let's say from a two-month operation, just me and Landro back in 2020, now we are sitting at about 21 people working full-time in Voxel Architects, developing for brands in the Metaverse. We work with big investors in the space. We work with art collectors, for which we build a lot of art galleries. We work for brands like Sotheby's, like Consensys and MetaMask, like Real Vision, and many other brands in the space that I cannot disclose at the moment, but they're in the making. But yeah, I guess I would say that it it feels like 2 years in the metaverse, like these past 2 years since the company was founded, passed really, really fast, and it feels like 1 year in the metaverse feels like 5 years in real life. It's just it's just crazy.
Oh my God. I think like it would be so interesting to touch base on the statement like 5 years from now and like see how you feel then, like I feel like it's only getting like obviously it was like this, oh, what is NFT type of conversation early pandemic, and then now it's like the buzzword, right? Like everybody has like wants an NFT. We're at that point, or maybe they're not there even, like maybe it's still early adopters, but a little bit more buzz around it, and then it's going to be a point where everybody wants to be on there, and then you guys are going to be like 1,000 people companies. So that's
I mean, who knows, I mean, everybody's talking about the metaverse right now, and the amount of requests that we get is absolutely crazy.
yeah.
We're actually developing our company more and more. By the day, we're employing more people to just face up with the demand.
Yeah.
So I guess besides, let's say, being involved in the space and having experience in design, we can also say that we were also extremely lucky to be in this
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
because we were there all at the right time, I would say.
Yeah, and I love the multidisciplinarity and like the background too, and being partly in car design and in architecture, and kind of learning from both, but also understanding who to bring in and in what like specific to your point, right? Like when you go into the specialization of each field. So we very much appreciate blurring the boundaries between disciplines at Sour too. So I loved hearing that story. I guess like my question is, and we kind of always start with like a diagnostics in a part in our episodes. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around issues that might come about in the world, or the self-generated problems we're creating in the world through like this well, first I guess like cryptocurrency in general, but as in addition to all the potential, right? Because with anything new that we're bringing into the world, it has its benefits and it has its issues, and also like fast growth is as exciting it is, can also be like a perfect environment to accumulate a lot of mistakes as you grow too, right? So I think in like any systems theorists will tell like governments or corporations to slow down in order to like see, but we're in such a world now, and especially once this is in the virtual space, it's even faster. Like you can't build a city overnight in the real world, right? But you can technically in the metaverse. So Well, not technically. No, I didn't say that. You know that better, obviously. But it, like, my point is, it can be much faster compared to the real world. So I guess, like, my question is, not that I don't even know what future problems we might be creating for ourselves in this, like, new space in general. What are some things that you see that the industry needs to be cautious about, or things that we need to think twice before we're getting into, or like, and it's kind of like I'm almost seeing this as a little bit, like, you wouldn't go and self medicate. I mean, you can, but you should self medicate yourself. You should see a doctor. Like, I'm almost like trying to also understand who will be the experts in this field as yourself that you consult, so you don't go and, like, mess up something and things. That it's such unknown, that what are the problems that you think might generate, or we might be creating in the world through all these, like, very fast growing fields happening all at once and all interconnected, like in the metaverse, through NFTs to crypto and all of that. So
Yeah,
very loaded questions.
yeah, totally feel you, and yeah, it's understandable. I mean, like with every progress has its own, downsides, its own limitations, and its own problems. So I'd say the biggest problem, like specifically talking about the metaverse, the biggest problem that the metaverse is facing right now is scalability. So it's very hard for the technology that we have right now to scale at the level that we want to scale, right?
Right.
So even though the business might be scaling fast, the metaverse and the technology is not scaling as fast as our business, right?
Right.
So I would say that maybe we will have to wait a couple of years and see what happens, and see when will the mass adoption of the metaverse will happen. I mean, the thing is, here's the thing: the metaverse is existing for a long time.
Right.
The metaverse at its core is basically the internet, right? Like everything that we had from Web 2, even Web 1, I would say, until this point, has been the metaverse. More specifically, when we are referring to virtual worlds, we had games, we had video games like The Sims, we had video games like Minecraft, like Roblox, that already existed, that already did what the metaverse was supposed to do.
Yeah.
The interesting part about the metaverse right now is that it has this blockchain part attached to it.
Yeah.
And this is a game changer. So another issue that the metaverse is facing, speaking about cryptocurrency, it's the regulation of cryptocurrency. As you probably know, I know that Turkey, for example, banned Bitcoin for a period of time because they were able to figure out how to regulate this transaction,
Right.
right? Likewise for China, right? So this is a huge issue that metaverse is facing right now. The blockchain metaverse I'm talking about, because it is at its core based on this cryptocurrency ecosystem, right?
Right.
And it's trying in a way to revolutionize the way that we look at things, the way that we interact with things, the way that we touch things, right? And yeah, it does come with its hiccups. Speaking about the people, speaking about the architects, a problem that architects might be facing is actually getting into this industry. And we call ourselves Voxel Architects, and we design buildings in the metaverse. But it's much more complex than that to design buildings in the metaverse. Like, you can build a building in Rhino. I have experience in Rhino. I have built a lot of buildings previously in Rhino, but you cannot just take that building that you have done in Rhino and just slap it in the metaverse. You cannot just design something in Revit and call it that you did it in the metaverse. If you wanna put your building out there, you will need to have an understanding as an architect, not only of architect, but also about game design and art, which I was mentioning before. Like,
Yeah.
I was mentioning car design. And the reason why I like car design so much is because of the process that it's involved behind the design of every car. So when you design a house, you gotta take care of about like also the structural integrity of the house,
Right.
And also some architects are very, let's say, uh, simplistic in what they do. Like if someone says design me a building, they will just design them a functional building, you
Right.
know, because that's what some architects do too. But when you but in the car industry, that's different because the level of competitivity there is
Yeah.
much bigger, and the design process that they're implementing it's helps them create new and exciting shapes that you cannot see on other car. Look at Lexus, for example. Like I love how Lexus, for example, gets his inspiration from leaves, like just simple leaves. And when they're looking at the shape of the leaf and where they're creating like the shape of the body, you can actually see the resemblance with the leaf. Zaha Hadid, for example, that got inspired by the honeycomb to create some of her buildings and shapes like those fluid shapes that she was creating. Frank Gehry that has created the Louis Vuitton Foundation, and that was inspired by the motion of the water and the fish water, you know. And I found that really interesting and inspiring,
Yeah.
and that's how I understood that there is this connection between the design of cars and the design of everything in general. You gotta have that inspiration, you gotta create something new. And this is what the metaverse is all about. The metaverse is about creativity. It doesn't really matter how well you execute a building in Revit and how well you can render a building in Revit. It's all it matters here is having that creative touch as an architect to create something new and exciting for the player, right? This you don't have any technical limitation. Forget about every technical limitation.
Right.
You only have like you're only limited by what the code of that respective metaverse tells you. And yeah, this is an issue that architects might facing and getting used to. It's a combination of architecture, design, game design and development, and also coding. So programming is a huge plus,
Right.
especially because you don't have engineers in a metaverse, but you do have people that are coding the stuff. So when you're designing something in real life, you have the design on paper, you translate it into a real building, and then all the interactions are there, right? Like as soon as you put a door, you can just open the door.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like that. When you do that in the metaverse, no, it's not like that. You have to code the door to be able to open. You have to code the elevator to be able to function. You have to code the people that are walking, the virtual people that are walking there, to be interactive and actually speak with you. So there's another layer of depth in this because you were mentioning like a building in a metaverse will obviously take less than a building in real life. But actually, that's what a lot of people think. And it does take less, but not as much as you think.
Right.
Like we still have to go through that design process that architects usually go when they're designing a house. Like it can take 1 month, it can take 2 months. After which, let's say the 3D modeling phase, and that could be the equivalent of the actual building phase, can take 3 weeks, and in real life, let's say it can take 3 months, right? But then comes the interesting part because you have the coding part, which adds another layer of complexity to the building, which can be a month or 2 months, depending on
Right.
everything that you want your building to do. So I would say that the metaverse is not to replace the real world. The metaverse is just complementary to the real world, and it's another way of seeing and visualizing things. And I think while it comes with its drawbacks right now, with its scalability issues and with its, let's say, problems with lag at the moment and crashes and all that stuff, a period that basically every software has to go through, I think it comes with huge advantages also. And the advantages of this is that it has an opportunity to create a lot of jobs, a lot of new jobs. Like you cannot find jobs as an architect in real life because there are so many people that are following an architecture school and so few people that actually manage to get in. But the metaverse creates another opportunity for that. And if you take your time to study and actually try to get in the metaverse and try to understand how it works, you might find yourself a job for life. So yeah, that's my take on this.
I think that's such a good point because in the end there is a job crisis, not even like in, you know, in the design space or architecture, like in real life too, just so that, you know, architects are not in control of their medium, right? Like they rely on contractors, engineers, a developer, like the construction loan the bank is going to give, that are all these factors that are totally external to the architect's process, yet your project relies on that. Whereas in metaverse, if you have control over the design and coding, you are more control of your final outcome, as like an artist, right? Where like in art, you can create your artwork and say, this is my artwork, and there's no one else to judge you. But in an architect's profession, you're so constrained but by all the other like regulations, like so many parties, that you may not realize what you have intended in the first place. So I find it very exciting to be able to create with, yes, you will have constraints, obviously, or limitations due to technology, but you have so much more flexibility on what that virtual world looks like. Which is also like mind-boggling to me. Sometimes I see these like spaces that look like a building in the real world, and I think it's kind of like I see it as a transition into the metaverse, where like we do seek some familiarity, right? Like we do want to see a building to get into in the virtual space, but then like, and then I can imagine 10 years from now, what we call a building may look completely insane and different, right? Like it's going to evolve in such a crazy way that's how I also definitely see your point in um, this being complementary to the real world, because it will be this like crazy world that we cannot experience in the real world anyway. So, and to your point too, it's like in gaming and in the game worlds, we had this already, right? Like you had worlds built for games themselves. But now it's also becoming more accessible to general public, and just creates like additional experience to their like day-to-days. I will get into all the like philosophical questioning in a little bit, and you know, like, and the matrix conversations. But before that, I think it's interesting what you said on scalability, because assuming, you know, we do provide equitable education for everyone and people can get into fields like architecture or programming and things like that, can be part of metaverse, there is a huge opportunity of employment, as you said. And the scalability of issues around scalability. And I think, I guess what's interesting is also like, especially on the cryptocurrency side, the sustainability issue, the energy consumption, like there's various dimensions to the scalability factor. I think it's important that you're highlighting that too, because those are the things that really do need to get addressed for us to become not like something that actually creating more issues in the world, but actually potentially solving some of the problems, given that, you know, we provide the education for like younger generations to be able to be part, to resolve so much of like employment crises that happen throughout the world. So, so I'm glad you highlighted that too, because I think it's important to kind of like be aware and address these early on, so that, you know, we don't have these like self-generated issues many years later that we did not address in time. But just like those are kind of like what made me think in terms of both like things that we need to address today, but the potential of where this is going. And of course, like I think I have to ask, just because Matrix 4 came to the world like after many, many years. And then you know, it's also fascinating for me to like hear from younger generations and their perspective on things, and obviously like how millennials thought was different than Gen Z, and how Gen Z thinks is going to be different than, I guess, an alpha, right? Who's probably going to be the main users of the metaverse. There's a lot of questioning around what we've did to our planet Earth, where this is going, and then the fact that all the issues in this world and the willingness to either isolate ourselves from it or forget it for a while and therefore want to be in an alternate world. And then the question is that how attractive that alternate world does become, that we spend more and more time there. And there was this interview, I think, with like Keanu Reeves on Matrix. I think that like two people who are like Gen Z were having conversations with Keanu Reeves about like the Matrix. He's explaining the movie, and he's explaining the concept, saying, you know, the real world, like you have a purpose, in the Matrix you don't, and we're trying to get people back to the real world. And the Gen Z are like, why? And he's like, well, you know, because it's the real world, we have to go back to the real world. They just don't understand, like, because they're like, well, if you're happy in the Matrix, like, why do you want to go back to the real world? So that's fascinating to me to see like how our point of view is like generationally also changing too. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on obviously like how we think of metaverse today is different, and the upcoming generations are going to have a total different view on this. And what is your feeling? And I know you already said like it's going to be a complementary world, but what are your thoughts about like preference of one world to another, and also like what upcoming generation might expect from the metaverse?
Yeah. So to touch a little bit on that subject that you mentioned with Keanu Reeves and the Matrix, I think that's a really interesting point. Like, why would you want to go back when you have like this beautiful universe that you're living in? Well, the fact is that universe that you're living in, it's dependent on the universe that sucks, right? Unfortunately, that's the reality. So
That's like
I'm
the
not,
title of the episode.
I'm not gonna go into any cosmic stuff whatsoever and talk about reptilians and all that stuff. But I'm gonna talk about the fact that we are creating a universe, right? With all this development in AI and uh, the development of these virtual worlds and the fact that you can meet virtually and talk with someone, we are literally on the verge of or creating something of our own, right? Our own universe within our universe. So I like to compare this like with the appearance of blockchain. There comes this expansion, like this all this metaverse popping up left and right, 50, 100 versions of virtual worlds that are essentially part of the same universe. It's similar to what happened with the Big Bang of our universe, right? So it's just literally a Big Bang of the metaverse. It's finally emerging, and you have all these different metaverses that you can compare with planets, and you can fly from one planet to another, and they're interoperable, or maybe they're interoperable, they're light years away, but they're still cool. They can jump from one to another. So that's really cool. But ultimately, you will still have to go back to the real world and take care of it, because that's the way you're gonna sustain this metaverse, this dreamy world that you want to live in, right? It's always a trade-off, uh, not only in this, but in life in general. Like, you gotta pay a price for everything that you do. And the real world, it's more important than the metaverse, I would say, at the moment. Uh,
Unless we're
uh,
all plugged in, you know where this could go, right? The movie tells us.
yeah, I mean, unless you have a full-time job in the metaverse and actually working to produce something in real life, I mean, that can work too, right? Like,
Right.
imagine you work fully in the metaverse, you are at a counter desk, and you are speaking with one, and that action actually translates to a real life interaction.
Right.
So it can be vice versa, do something in real life and that translates into the metaverse. So ultimately they will affect each other. And you talked a little bit about Bitcoin and sustainability. And well, yeah, Bitcoin has been a problem with the proof of work. Like when Bitcoin was new, nobody was talking about this because nobody understood the effects of this right from the start. But eventually, as the time went by, people started to understand the amount of power that it requires to run this whole ecosystem. So what happened, people came with a new system. So instead of using proof of work, everything moved to a proof of stake, right? And the proof of stake basically eliminates the need of miners of the world. At least that's what I understood, right? Um, Meaning that the power consumption will decrease dramatically. I don't know if that's a good move or not. I'm being skeptical right now of every new innovation because, as I said, every new innovation has its drawbacks.
Right.
So I'm not sure if this proof of stake will solve all the issues, but I know that that proof of stake it's aimed to solve the issues that Bitcoin and Ethereum are facing right now, and that's why people are so hyped about Ethereum 2.0 because
Right.
that is meant to emerge from a proof of work to a proof of stake and solve that sustainability issue that Bitcoin currently has.
Yeah, no, I think that's important to highlight because I'm not bringing those up to be like, I mean, yes, I think we should be skeptical about everything that comes to the earth and just question, right? Not even being skeptical, but why are we doing this? Is this good for us? Because I think we are at a day and age where when something new comes about, we have so much more information and access to be able to understand what could be the associated problems, right? And therefore, we also have the opportunity to resolve them or address them much quicker. I mean, it's kind of like, the real estate construction industry, they have been unsustainable for hundreds of years, maybe at this point, right? But we did not have the information. We didn't care about sustainability. In 1950s, there were ads about throw away life, basically just use plastic and toss it away. That's like 70 years ago. I mean, it's less than 100 years ago. So I think like now that we have so much more awareness and caution, especially around, I guess, the climate crisis, and yes, we're in an environmental crisis in general in the world. There's even though Bitcoin did grow quite as much to come to the level where it is now, there's a big energy consumption issue. It is still detected earlier on in its future, right? To be able to address it. Maybe we have less tolerance towards these issues. Maybe that's why we're attacking it. But it's a good thing, right? I think those control mechanisms do need to happen anyway as anything evolves, which is why I think with anything new, it's worthwhile to have a conversation. What are your concerns, or what should we be watching out about? Which, we definitely weren't capable of doing as much back in the day, just because we didn't have the means or the technology or access to information. So I do hear you when you're saying I'm skeptical, is it going to work? But it's prototyping, right? There has to be some action towards it. We can't just say oh yeah, so Bitcoin is really bad to the environment, let's just all drop it. No, we also see the advantages that come with that. But it's a great point to just approach everything with a little bit okay, but why? Questioning. And I think to your point, which is very interesting, is you were saying in the metaverse, maybe there will be job opportunities in the metaverse, so you don't have to come back to the real world that often, which sounds crazy for us maybe at this stage. And I'm not even saying how we say it, maybe coming off as like skeptical. But the thing is though, like when the metaverse is at that level, that generation like of population, maybe that they're okay with that. Like if we told someone 100 years ago that our lives would be controlled by a mini device and we would be looking at it like half of the day, it would tell, are you crazy? Like, are you being controlled by a device? That's insane. Like, why would you ever do that, right? Do we mind doing it now? No. So I think it's kind of like what sounds like far-fetched to us would just be like, yeah, sure, for like that population who's already like coming to the world immersed into such technology. Like I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. She thinks Google Home and Alexa are people. Like she talks to them. So, like for her, it's totally normal having like digital friends or like virtual friends or maybe interacting with robots. Like she's 3 and it's already normal. So I think in that way, sometimes people see it always as like, oh, like it's going to be such a grim world. Everybody's going to be like online, and it's going to be like everybody's going to be like gamers. But like we don't know what the world is going to be at that state and like what the population needs at that time. So I don't know if it's really our place to dictate how a bright or a grim future it brings. It's just what's important to discuss is that it doesn't destroy the planet as we're doing so.
Not it doesn't destroy it at all. That's the point, and that's why I'm mentioning this. Like, it will actually benefit the planet. This, believe it or not. Like, think about the fact that if people will work in a metaverse, they won't have to commute to work in the first place. That already eliminates the need of like the traffic jams, solves a lot of traffic jams problem, solves like removes a lot of cars from the street and a lot of like nocive gases, so that in itself is a huge benefit, and who knows what other benefits can the metaverse bring with it. Because as I mentioned earlier, the real world helps the metaverse exist, and the metaverse helps the real world with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point, because there's a lot of concepts that I'm sure you came across around like 15-minute cities, like creating walkable neighborhoods and environments and eliminating the need of cars, which is ironic because you come from like car design too. So I'm sure it's a bittersweet moment for you. But also like that is really not feasible if you're still working for companies or corporations and have to commute to their offices because you have no control over where their offices are, right? Like without going to work, you can maybe create, yes, a walkable like lifestyle for yourself in a day, because that's your social experience or how you do your shopping or visit a doctor. And as long as those like uses are integrated into neighborhoods, that is feasible to do. But once you put the component of work starts to like, you can't necessarily have an office in every neighborhood, right? So it's kind of like that we have to recognize that these like ideal sustainable concepts also needs the digital world to exist and be able to, I mean, we saw the pandemic showed us like it was a big deal working remote for so many companies, right? It was a complete no-no. And over like a course of like maybe 2 weeks, suddenly everybody was okay with it. Like, I don't know how many times I probably created carbon footprints having to travel to a meeting that I necessarily have to be there in person. And we eliminated all of those. I think we became more efficient. Did it also highlight some of the issues that already existed pre-pandemic, like access to computer, access to internet, being able to really, utilize your electronics without too much energy consumption, like all of those problems that were already the pandemic just sort of amplified that and showed us the need to address those. But that doesn't mean we need kind of, it's also a solution like this to alleviate some of the problems we're experiencing in the world, as you said. It's really just, I think there's a huge tendency for like anything you just like X out, it's easier, right? Oh, it's that already, like it's polluting the world, or it's, when something bad comes up, everybody's quick to kind of like rush a judgment. But I think the idea is more so that how are we aware of any like potential issues that come about as this new big bang is happening, and how can we address those in a timely manner and really use this new world to benefit our own world, because what we have currently as a system in our world is not sustainable anyway.
Yes, definitely. And I loved your point that you made with the office and being able to work online. Like at the beginning, like companies were scared, or like, oh, we're gonna lose space. We're not gonna be able to work anymore. But actually, working online for some companies specifically was the best thing that ever happened. And the fact of the matter is, the pandemic is gonna end, and they're gonna still be working online because it's so convenient. All right. So why would you stop something that, like, you can even save a lot of money as a company just by doing this? Like, why would you not try to save money and boost your profits as a company?
Exactly. And it's as long as like people have access to internet and computer, it also brings it, access and inclusion and flexibility to so many people. I mean, I know people who were rejected from colleges, people living with disabilities, because the college
Yes.
campuses are inaccessible. And suddenly now, like, they're also say, oh, now everyone's okay with like online education or online working. And so many people, like commuting maybe is even harder for them for many different reasons. For them, suddenly also everything became more accessible, right? So for a mother who's also like needs to have more flexibility in her schedule, working from home became chaotic, but also has the potential to be flexible. So I think in that sense, it kind of allowed us to be, in an ironic way, more human, because we allowed more freedom and flexibility to people, and didn't stopped demanding physical presence in an office space. I mean, obviously, like, we're social animals. We do also, there's huge benefits of being at the same place as your teammates from time to time, but we also recognize the need that it doesn't have to be every day, and it's kind of an overkill. So
Yeah, and like with all the technology that we have today, we can still have these interactions that we need to have, uh, like, and benefit from this, even though we don't have that real life touch. It's still something that we can go by every day, and the pandemic proves to us. It's not like we were starting to crawl on walls because we were having meetings in Google Meets and not in real life, for
exactly.
example. At least not for me. So yeah, that's the thing. Um,
Matt, I'm gonna ask one real quick question too, and I know the intent of metaverse is that, this alternate world that we're experiencing and kind of, I guess, living in, right? But we also obviously see the huge benefit of having digital twins, and this is, like how Revit, for example, enables that in like architecture. For many other opportunities around simulation, right? And this can be just simulation, different future scenarios. It can be simulating risk, things that either are too costly or dangerous to test in the real world. How do you see like advancements in metaverse, I guess, kind of like enabling or expanding our opportunities to test and experiment further? Things that may be too costly to do in the real world, or too risky to do, or we don't even know how to do. How do you see that like kind of efforts around like simulating things and the metaverse, like developments around those kind of like feeding each other?
I mean, the metaverse, the virtual world is literally a software, right? And it has to be done by software developers, just like they work in Revit. In Revit, you have different tools to test, let's say, some parts of the building, uh, and other building products. You'll also have, let's say, a virtual world tailored for testing this. I don't think specifically like you will have like a building test, a test in the metaverse of a building falling over, because literally nothing will happen in the metaverse, right? Like if a building falls on you, you can either fly away from it or catch it with a finger, you know.
I love that.
So I mean, I think that's what specialized softwares are for,
Mm.
and I don't necessarily see that thing a necessity in a metaverse. But I was about to say something regarding what you said earlier. So you mentioned testing the structures of the building, and before that you mentioned something else.
Um, well, I was talking about like, I guess, access and flexibility to people all around. And then I jumped into question around simulation, especially
Oh
to,
yeah, digital twins. Yes,
yes, digital.
now remember. Digital twins are going to actually be a huge thing in the metaverse. So right now, for example, we are building something similar in a metaverse. We are building a first one of a kind house in the metaverse and also in the real world, like at the same time. And this house is basically going to be packaged, like the virtual house and the real one, they're going to be packaged as an NFT and sold Sotheby's
Wow.
in an auction. So it's going to be one of the first purposely built houses to be sold as NFTs, right?
Wow.
And that's in itself is a huge milestone. And as the president of Sotheby's was saying, we are trying to push the boundaries of real estate, uh, and we are trying to adopt like NFTs as a new standard of acquiring items,
Hmm.
because NFTs will act as title of properties for houses, right? Imagine we are ditching papers. That's another huge benefit for the environment, right?
Right.
We are ditching all the papers, and everything is going to be digital. And your house certificate will basically become an NFT certificate that you'll have in your wallet, and you are going to be able to prove that that house is yours through that NFT, if the law and the government will approve this,
Yeah,
which will eventually do.
they will eventually do. Yeah.
Yeah, it just need to be proven that is possible. Another use for digital twins is actually to present a house in the real life, right? Like if you're a real estate agent, and let's say you not necessarily build that house and sell it as an NFT, but you just want to present it. You build an exact same copy of that house in a metaverse, and you walk with the client through it. And imagine that you don't only see that house, but you also see neighboring houses. So you see your neighbors in the metaverse, which are equivalent of the neighbors in real life.
That's so
Um,
awesome because like we were just talking about this the other day. When you're moving, how much of a pain it is to go and see houses, how much time that consumes and how inefficient that is to see where you want to move into. I would rather just have a virtual tour of all the potential houses and then pick one and then move into the real one. I would really very much prefer that. This made me think of that. That would be awesome.
yeah, I mean, this literally has the potential to revolutionize the entire industry and the way that we see houses, and further reduce the carbon footprint. So there are already three main advantages of reducing the carbon footprint through the metaverse and through the cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency in itself is an entire other subject,
Right.
like about decentralization, being able to take control of your goods or your money, um, the fact that you cannot print, let's say, more money whenever you want to.
Yeah.
Like that's one big selling point of crypto, and many other advantages, that basically intertwine with the metaverse and create this new and exciting environment.
It's so fascinating since like the financial system basically created well, it didn't create this world. I mean, if we're going to talk about Big Bang, something else created this world, but how it's run and managed, and all the systems basically were built based on that capital system that, or like in US, it's like the Federal Reserve Bank or whatever. And now we're seeing this like new and exciting world that is based on something that is much more decentralized and also less easy to manipulate, right?
Yeah.
Like at least like I don't necessarily understand how it could be manipulated at all at this point, or maybe because I'm outside of the field, I can't understand. But now we're seeing this like the other world being built on a completely different infrastructure, and it's almost it's to me it's exciting to see is that where is it going to go, right? Like how it can evolve. Like we do have an understanding of the flexibility and advantages that it can bring, but we don't even know like its full potential yet, and that's super exciting. And I think that's why we also wanted to have this episode with you to really like hear what is happening today and where do you think it might be going. So I guess like because we have such a like also a young listening base too, we were always mindful of trying to wrap up with a piece of advice that you would give for anybody who wants to test new things, explore new ideas, push boundaries, make progress in this world. What would be your advice to them?
I guess my advice would be to research and explore, and most importantly, be brave to discover new things. Um, like when we stepped into the metaverse, we had no idea what we signed up for. We just did, like we were just there. We tried to explore new things, and here we are right now doing what we're doing. So the metaverse presents itself a huge opportunity, and the more people are engaged in this, and the more people will explore and not be afraid to try out new things as opposed to what they do in real life. I think that the metaverse will have a huge opportunity to develop just by the courage of these people. um, I actually know a lot of people that made like huge advancements in the NFT space, right from the beginning, right from like I was mentioning that other type of events, that weekly gathering, and there were not many people. Like there were like 50 or 60 people gathering in that event weekly and discussing about NFTs, and people who didn't even know what NFTs were at that time, and they were not interested because they were too busy with their day-to-day problems,
Right.
that they forgot to, like, they were, how is for example, a horse that has like his sides covered just to see in front, but they're not seeing in perspective. They are too focused to follow that carrot that's in front of them that they do not see left and right. So I would say, like, just open your eyes for new opportunities because they can lie around at every corner. It just happens that you just ignore them, and the world is full of them.
This was awesome. Thank you so much, George. I know we're over time and we can talk about this for many more
I mean,
hours.
I would have talked even more about this. Like I would have gotten into gaming, but
I know,
time is.
We only had 1 hour, but this was like a great synopsis, I guess, and so helpful for us to like have an understanding of what's happening today, what's the potential, and I love your advice on just be brave. And I think any new innovation comes with a lot of unknowns and sometimes even like scary sides, but I think we can all pursue that with the right attitude and collaboration. So thank you so much for making the time. This was such a treat and well needed for us after after this like big hype and so much conversation around our virtual world and ourselves.
I love being here, and I really enjoy talking with you.
Thank you.
And that is this week's episode of What's Wrong with the Podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Links can be found in the episode description, and you can also find them on our website, podcast.what'swrongwith.xyz. If you found value in the show, we would appreciate if you could rate us and leave a review, or you can simply tell your friends about us. For more details on our guests, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Don't forget to join us next week. Thank you for listening.